loved it. I'll send you a copy. Bam! Bitch went down.
Welcome back to Horror Queers, your official pig-fucking podcast.
And I'm Trace. Joe. You just really dove right in there.
You know what? I'm trying to warn people right off the top. If you've got any kind of animal cruelty vibes, this is maybe not the best episode.
It's actually really funny because I maybe you saw, but I tweeted on Twitter that I was watching a movie that involved pig fucking. And I thought that this was a very unique thing to mention in a movie, but apparently the first episode of Black Mirror also has a man fucking a pig, and everyone immediately guessed it was
sure
that.
Does.
Yeah,
which is kind of funny because Black Mirror is not a movie; it's a anthology.
That's
TV
what I was
series,
thinking,
particularly in those early episodes because they aired in the UK, so they're like a hot 45 minutes.
And someone got really catty with me, and they retweeted it, and they were like, "Yeah, we've all seen the premiere episode of Black Mirror," and I was like, "Listen, bitch, I'm not talking about that."
And that bitch, if it is you, thank you for listening.
Well, the girl did not follow me. Like, she was not a follower. So I'm going to assume that someone probably like responded to me that she does follow. So I don't think she listens to us. But if you did, if you have started listening to us, because this episode will drop in 3 weeks, thanks.
Yes. Still your official pig fucking podcast.
Apparently there's also a movie called The Pig Fucking Movie. Didn't know that either.
Yeah.
So yeah.
The more you learn.
So what is this mystery movie?
So we are talking about Calvaire, which is a film from the midsection of the new French Extremity, and it is from 2004, directed by Fabrice Du Welz.
Who is Belgian. I did make that note. So I don't know if they do their W's like W's or they do their W's like V's.
This is when you hop onto YouTube and you try to hear as many different interviews where they introduce the director.
If we have any new listeners, just a heads up, because you're probably going to be hearing a lot of name butchering in the past couple of weeks and probably the next couple of weeks as well, because we were smart and decided to program a bunch of foreign films into the span of a month.
We're trying to expand your horizons. You can thank us for it later. And yes, if we have butchered any of your national names,
and you can just point it out and like tweet us the phonetic pronunciation. But anyway, yes.
I mean, geez, if that's really what you want to tweet to us about.
I'm fine with that. I mean, like, I'd rather just don't be a dick about it, like Miss Premiere Black Mirror episode. So, this is Calvaire. That is the French term for Calvary, which we'll get into in a bit. But also in the States, it was called the Ordeal. My DVD says Calvaire, though, but I guess because, it is an American DVD, I think, but it might be out of print, so I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it was ever advertised exclusively as The Ordeal, or if it was like Calvaire, The Ordeal, so that people could not have to look up what Calvaire means. But whenever you look at posters or DVD covers, they all have the word Calvaire front and center.
I believe we are talking about this movie on around its 15th anniversary, because it did premiere at Cannes on May 18th, 2004. But I don't think it got a release until 2006. I could be wrong, though.
This is another one of those where it premiered over there and then took a couple years to come over here if you're hanging out in North America.
Which I will say, listeners, if you haven't watched this movie yet and the term new French extremity bothers you, it's actually not, well, it is disturbing, but it's not as outright.
Yeah. It's not the worst of them.
Despite the pig fucking and the rape, I would actually say that, like something like, if you've seen Martyrs, that's more disturbing than this movie. This movie's also more of a slow burn.
Yeah. Well, I think we'll probably get into where this fits among some of the other new French extreme films. So why don't you run us through the call?
We're looking at a runtime of 88 minutes, which feels a lot longer, but that's also just due to the fact that it's kind of like, this movie is an ordeal to sit through, I would argue, but, I liked it.
It earns its title.
It only opened in one theater in the States, so when it opened, it was number 118 with $890. And then it went on to gross $3,260, which adjusted today is like $4,500. Whatever, it's a foreign film. It's a super violent horror film. I did read one review, though, that was saying like... because it was at the theatrical release and it was a bad review, and it was like people who are like mad that foreign films they want to see like can't get distribution over here are going to be pissed when they see this and say this is what like American studios will take from foreigners.
Wow, that is some genre shaming, right?
It really is. So yeah, and the reviews, not super great. We're looking at a 39% on Rotten Tomatoes. However, I feel like this type of film is always divisive among critics, and I think that the horror critics are probably more lenient with it. Audiences, though, 51%. So I was a little bit surprised by that. Metacritic score kind of evens out, though. You got for critics, a 52 out of 100, and then a user score of 5.8 out of 10, which tracks. This isn't really an easy film to digest.
The numbers are a little bit interesting because I gathered that if you went to this kind of film, you would more or less know what you were getting into. I mean, or maybe not. Maybe not in 2004, because at this point, it's arguably a couple of years into the new French Extremity.
Well, and also because the disturbing stuff isn't like throughout the film, you could easily do a plot synopsis for this film that is very much like, hey, a man goes to a village and they're kind of crazy.
This is true.
But yeah, so like you already eloquently put, director is Fabrice Du Welz. I don't know. His most notable films, I haven't seen these, but I've heard of them. But one of them is called Vignon, and the other one is called Message from the King.
I've not seen the latter, but I have seen the former. It's on par. I'd say it's actually slower than this film. It's got Rufus Sewell in it.
He's the bad guy from A Knight's Tale, right? I know he's in a bunch of other shit, but that's literally the only thing I know. I think I watched that movie a lot as a kid, so I just as a preteen. So yeah.
It's a good frame of reference. I think a lot of people will probably be able to connect who we're talking about based on that. And also, I'm not surprised because that film, I think, was on fucking television all the time.
Yes,
right?
But I did see, like, that was a date night I went on with my mom. I mean, again, like, what? I think it's, 2001 when that movie came out? So I would have been 12, which tracks.
Yeah, that seems like a good, like, parental child night out kind of film.
And then we've got as our lead actor, now, okay, I think I'm going to say this right, but it's Laurent Lucas.
Yep.
So he is, so I didn't realize this. He's in Raw. He's the dad in Raw.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I didn't connect it, but now that you're saying it, I can see
when I was pulling his name and I was looking at his filmography, because again, a lot of these actors, a lot of their filmography are French things. And so I was like, I don't know what that is. And then I saw Raw and I was like, oh, and then I went to go see what it was. Yeah, he's the dad. He's
also in a great French TV show called it translates to The Revenants or The Returned, but in France it was called Les Revenants. It's like an intellectual zombie TV show that ran for a couple of years, and it's quite good, but also slow.
Honestly, I would say Les Revenants, so you're whatever you do with the back of your mouth when you pronounce the R, I can't do that.
I roll up the rim to win. It's if you ever want to practice saying French things, you can practice your R's with.
See, okay, but that's the thing. Whenever I do like, because I took Spanish in high school, because that's like, if you're in Texas, like Spanish is kind of the one you take. I can't roll my R's.
Fair.
Yep, can't do it.
Really?
I know, it really sucks.
We're learning so much about each other right now. None of it pertinent, but super interesting.
And honestly, really, the only other actor of note is, oh god, so it's Jackie Beroyer, who plays Bartel, the innkeeper. There are other people in this movie, but none of them are really, like, prevalent. It's pretty much just Laurent and Jackie the whole movie, which Mark and Bartel.
Yeah, it's nearly a two-person act. I'll mention a couple of other people in the plot synopsis, but
right.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's these two dominating the film.
And on that note, then, why don't you tell me what it's about?
All right, so here is your mostly brief rundown of what happens in Calvaire, in case you have not seen it. Mark Stevens, Laurent Lucas, is a young traveling singer. After a concert at the nursing home on Christmas Eve, in which he is propositioned twice by different women for sex, Mark begins to drive to his next gig. Shortly afterwards, his van breaks down, and he is led through the storm by Boris, Jean-Luc Couchard, a potentially mentally handicapped young man searching for his female dog, Bella. Mark is brought to an inn run by Mr. Bartel, Jackie Beroyer. The next morning, Bartel promises to fix Mark's truck, but indicates it will take at least a day. Mark elects to take a walk, and Bartel warns him not to go into the village. While Mark is away, Bartel sees sexually explicit photos included in the envelope from the woman who propositioned him at the nursing home, as well as Mark's cell phone. On his walk, Mark sees a group of young men having sex with a pig, and he beats a hasty retreat. That night at dinner, Bartel encourages Mark to perform for him after confessing that his wife Gloria, a singer, has left him. The next day, Mark figures out that Bartel has not fixed the van. Bartel then knocks him unconscious, dresses him in his wife's old dress, ties him up, and cuts off his hair, claiming it is for protection against the village men. Bartel treats Mark as his absent wife, even calling him by Gloria's name. And even though Mark attempts to escape, he is caught in a snare by Boris and returned to Bartel. That night, Bartel goes to the village and tells the men at the canteen that his wife has returned and that they should stay away. The men dance creepily as Bartel, Boris, and Mark eat Christmas dinner. The village men then attack the house, killing Bartel and raping Mark before he escapes. He runs through the marshes, pursued by Robert, Philippe Nahon, who falls into a bog and begs Mark, as Gloria, to confess that she loves him. Mark submits, absolving the man of his guilt, and then the guy sinks to his death, and Mark is left alone in the wilderness.
Did you mention that Mark became Gloria? Like, he took on the persona of Gloria in the end as the man was sinking?
I mean, I said it, but not in that fashion, so yes.
Yeah. Also, I didn't realize this, because I didn't know who Robert was when I was going through my call sheet, but the man that plays Robert, Philippe Naon, he's in High Tension and Irreversible.
Yeah, which is funny because this one I can't place. So I've seen both of those films, but I can't remember who he was.
I haven't seen High Tension probably since it was released on DVD in the States, although I imagine we'll be covering it on this podcast at some point.
I'm sure people are probably saying, oh, I can't believe that you're not covering that.
Well, yeah, right? It's like, people, we're trying to cover something that you haven't seen before so we can expose you to more films. So yeah, this is a lot of stuff in a movie.
It's like light on plot, heavy on dread, and just like...
Well, it's actually very easy to look at this movie literally, and honestly, when it ended, I was very much like, okay, I mean, it's fine. It's, really shocking and disturbing, and that's that. But I was doing a little bit more research on it today, and it's a very surreal film. And if you kind of go don't look at it as, I don't want to say not the real world, but it's very much like, so okay, I read this going into it that the director intended for Mark and Bartel to be the only two characters in the film, and it started out that way, and then they ended up adding more characters, but then he still considers every other character in this village to basically still be Bartel or a version of Bartel's psyche.
Yeah, when I saw that on the call sheet, I was intrigued, but also mildly dismissive.
Okay. Why are you dismissive of that?
Well, maybe we should start with a bit of context.
Go ahead.
So setting this film within the boundaries of the new French Extremity and thinking about why or how it sort of fits in.
Yeah, by all means.
Okay, so in case anyone does not know, New French Extremity was coined by a film programmer and writer named James Caan. And I'm referencing a chapter from Alexandra West's book called Films of the New French Extremity, which covers pretty much all of the films that you would expect to fall within this cycle. So it starts with Gaspar Noé's work in the 90s, but it really kicks up steam in around 2002 when he does Irreversible, which is the really terrible rape in reverse film that stars
Monica Bellucci and Vincent Cassel.
There we go. Yes, thank you. So Jacques Caan was actually very dismissive of this. Like, he did not like this, so he coined the phrase, but he was not in favor of it. So he categorizes it as cinema suddenly determined to break every taboo, to wade in rivers of viscera and spumes of sperm, to fill each frame with flesh, nubile or gnarled, and subject it to all manner of penetration, mutilation, and defilement. And he's talking about the films of French authors like Catherine Breillat, Claire Denis, Gaspar Noé, and Bruno Dumont. And so what Alexandra West says is that these are films that they're just not afraid to be in your face, to be aggressive, to do things that would be considered completely taboo and gross and make you uncomfortable. And part of this is that this is a really significant historical moment in France where there was a bunch of repression about the past, and France, from the outside, is often considered very civil and very genteel, and they've got this long history behind them. But it's also like one of the spots in Europe that has seen the most war, the most death, the most casualties, and these kinds of things. So films of the new French Extremity are basically taking all of that anger and that anxiety and that death and trauma, and then they're throwing into the mix things like this burgeoning neo-Nazi racism thing that unfortunately the US is kind of going through right now, but they were going through it right at the turn of the century and in the early 2000s. And these filmmakers were trying to process that through their films. So basically, Calvaire falls into a spate of films that more or less deals with people from the city getting accosted by people from the country. And part of that is this idea that the cities are stable and normal. And then if you happen to go out into the old country, it's where the past is still present because these people have not kept up with modern times. They are still adhering to folklore, to tradition, and you're far more likely to not only encounter conflict when two groups encounter each other, but also it's all of that murky, dirty, messy shit that city folk, and I'm like using city as not like a literal city folk, but like the more modern
people who just aren't like, you know, not technologically advanced on a farm.
Yeah. And they end up representing all of this shit bubbling up to the past. So in this case, the fact that we're contending with a man whose wife has left him and he can't let go of the past to the point that he forces the past onto the present is very apt.
Well, and so that's why, okay, like with this particular movement, like I haven't seen a lot of the films in it. You know, I've seen High Tension, I've seen Martyrs, I've seen Inside, but like I haven't seen Frontiers. I have not seen Irreversible, and I mean, there's a bunch more, and I'm those are like your big popular ones that you know made it to the States. Mm-hmm. But what I actually like, because people always tend to say that, oh, Inside is like one of the best horror films ever made. And I like Inside, but like Inside doesn't really say a lot for me. It's just very much I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but it's a very simple story of, you know, pregnant woman getting attacked in her house by a crazy lady. And the reason I like movies like Martyrs more is because there's more on that movie's mind. You know, there's a big philosophical question at the base of Martyrs. And maybe not necessarily a question in this one, but there's definitely like it's making a statement about their society.
Yep. And I don't think that you're wrong either. This film, it's maybe got a bit more on its mind than Inside. There is more to Inside than just the conflict between the two women. So I find this film and Frontiers are similar.
I saw them listed together a lot in the brief research that I did.
Yeah, and Alex West actually puts them together in her chapter. So Frontiers is a lot more explicit about it up front. So that film actually begins with a race riot that happens in Paris, and the main characters have to escape from the city, and they're mostly comprised of people of color or women, and they get out of the city, and it's very Texas Chainsaw Massacre. They end up on a farm thinking that they've got refuge in this kind of Airbnb style place, and the family ends up killing them because they're neo-Nazis and they are all about, you know, race purity and this kind of thing. Sorry, spoilers for Frontiers, but it's one of those things where a lot of the time the plot of these films is important, but not important in the way that a North American film's plot is. It's very much more about the experience of watching and going through. Like, the films are very...
Well, yeah, I mean, they're very much like endurance tests. And I mean, again, like, if you've ever seen a Gaspar Noé film, that's also kind of... I mean, I've only seen Climax of Gaspar Noé's. I've never seen any of his other films. But, like, when I tell people, I'm like, I loved it, but I never want to watch it again. And it's very much an experience than it is, you know, an actual movie that you're watching. But where these... specifically like these more horror leaning films of the new French Extremity movement it's all in their graphic violence and a lot of times also sexual assault. And so it's even with something like this, it is kind of an endurance test, you know, where it's not filled to the brim with like violence and sexual assault, but they're parts of the film. None of them are easy watches. I don't think I've ever seen a new French Extremity film where I've been like, oh, this is it's not like I'm cooking and I want to put something on in the background type movie.
No, and you're definitely not going to say, hey, I've just got a friend coming over who's casually interested in horror films. I think I'll just pop something on.
I agree, but I will say that I love Martyrs so much that I would probably show Martyrs to anyone. So beware if you come to my apartment.
Oh, wow. That is interesting. Yeah, I think of all of them, I think most people would probably agree that Martyrs is at the top of the endurance test, the most difficult to watch, but also definitely the most interesting things going on. And it is.
It is. And I totally understand why. I think the ones that people tend to enjoy the most or like maybe find the most fun is High Tension.
Yeah. Because that's almost why I'm less interested to talk about High Tension, because I think it's a great, very accessible film that then has a twist that doesn't really make a great deal
No, it doesn't.
sense.
And I've only seen it once, and I remember when I did see it, I was so fucking mad at that twist. I hated it. And not even because of the implications of what it means for queerness, but just because narratively it didn't make any sense.
No. Which makes it all the more bizarre that apparently they conceived of it first and then wrote the film backwards.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Enough about that
we're
film.
not talking about that.
Whatever.
We're talking about Calvaire.
But so, okay, so what I was going to kind of fascinating, by the way, nice, good bit of French history there. But what I was going to say with how the director, you know, intended Mark and Bartel to be the only two characters in the film, it's basically it's simplified, but basically, and so I found this quote from something called the Horror Digest, a now defunct website. But basically, you know, the director talks about in the commentary that he says that every other character in the film is a version of Bartel. They all want something from Mark. Old ladies want to put his hand on their crotch. Sexy nurses want to do him. Old men think Mark is their wife. And a man believes that Mark is his dog. Mark becomes a kind of vacant character, a template for all other characters to fill with what they want. And then another site, which is the Backseat Driver Reviews, Miss Erin Thompson. Mark represents sexual magnetism and talent to which people wish to attach themselves in order to achieve some type of gratification, whether it be sexual or a sense of emotional closeness. So on that level, I can kind of understand, you know, I mean, yes, watching it literally, it's a bunch of different people, but if you're looking at it from a purely, what's the word? Like almost like a microcosm, I guess, of society. Like it's like the people that want, and then the source of the object of their affection or the object of their desire.
I see. Okay. So almost like a dichotomy. You're either Mark and you're an object of desire, or you are not Mark and you are fixated on him.
Because honestly, again, you know me with my literal brain, when all the people started like believing that Mark was Gloria, I was like, what the fuck is going on in this town?
Oh. Yeah, and if you haven't seen this film before, those moments don't make any sense. Even when Bartel accosts him and starts saying, you know, Gloria, you come back to me, and oh, I'm going to cut your hair to protect you, and you're watching thinking, did I miss something? He never seems normal, but he didn't seem crazy.
I think on a rewatch, it might, because again, you're talking, is there a moment when the switch flips and Bartel like believes, oh wait, this isn't Mark, this is Gloria. Come back to me.
I would actually argue if you go back and watch it again, so this is the second time that I've seen this, albeit not in a very long time, there isn't that moment. The minute that he shows up at the inn, your spider sense should be tingling because Bartel is off his rocker right from the very beginning. The way that he acts around Mark, it's actually the minute that he hears that Mark is a singer. So when he sees his logo on the side of the van, that's your cue. Because the minute that he sees, oh, singer, my wife who left me, it was a singer.
Thinking back, I was like, oh, it's the moment when he asks him to sing to him at the dinner table. But then, of course, you're thinking, because you know, he calls the, quote unquote, calls the mechanic, but the phone is always unhooked from the get-go. So, yeah, I guess you could kind of gather that too. But again, that is more believable to me than the moment when he goes to the town and he brags about his wife's return, and all of them are like, nuh-uh, and then they do that weird fucking polka dance, which is the most terrifying part of the movie, which is saying something. And then they just believe it. And then again, everyone believes that Mark is Gloria. Well, except for Boris, who thinks that it's his dog.
There's also a very interesting gender divide in this film, right? So at the beginning of the film, when Mark is performing badly at the nursing home, many of the people who are watching him are women. There are a couple of men in the crowd, but obviously the connection between Mark and women is very firmly established. And it's also very important that when we see Mark, he's putting on makeup or he's taking off makeup, which are traditionally associated more with femininity. Of course, in this context, he's a performer, so it makes sense for him to be doing that.
With the exception of the beginning of the film, there aren't really any women in the film.
No, and that is by design.
Well, so and on that respect, then you can say that Mark is because he does feminine things. What society deems as feminine, and then he is put in a dress and made to be a woman. He's your final girl of this movie. I mean, obviously he's the final person, but like it's explicitly he's a girl, and by the end of this movie, he believes he is a girl, and it kind of made me draw comparisons to the very first film we ever discussed on Bloody, The Skin I Live In.
Yeah. And part of this is that in The Skin I Live In, it's a power dynamic, right? So that one it's a revenge fantasy. This one, you could almost argue it's a bit of a love story, as twisted and fucked up as that maybe.
Of a very, very, very crazy person. But it's like, but he's having this opposite gender forced on him. Granted, in The Skin I Live In, it's very physical and on top of mental, whereas this one, it's more just like he mentally succumbed over the span of, I want to say, like 2 days, comes to believe that he is a woman.
Oh, okay. So this is interesting. So do you believe at the end of the film when Mark tells Robert that he is Gloria and that he forgives him and then he lets him die, do you think he believes
I
that?
do. I did. That's how I took it. Did you think he was just saying that to appease him?
So there's a lot of stuff here. So, as we've said, this is about gender, but it's also about the performativity of that gender. So, I always read the ending as Mark is resistant to playing, and I'm doing that with air quotations. He's been resistant to playing the role of Gloria throughout the film, which is why he keeps trying to get away, and it keeps getting him into trouble. When he has that opportunity, at this point, he's not in danger anymore. He's escaped from everyone else in the town except for Robert. And Robert is in no position to accost him. He makes this conscious decision to say, okay, I'm prepared to give this person what they need before they pass. To me, that's him embracing the role, but I personally have never read it as Mark is now Gloria.
Admittedly, this is coming from some of the research that I did. And I do want to go back and read this piece from Aaron Thompson, who from the Backseat Driver Reviews. But hear me out. So she writes, everyone in this film is trying to make the most out of a situation that is so fucking depressing that it's simply easier to accept the world around you. I know, it's really eloquent. Than to try to fight to get out of it. Mark tries to make a better life for himself at the beginning of the film by traveling, and then he fails. He tries to make his life easier by escaping his captivity and fails. As a result, he is trapped, beaten, crucified, and humiliated. He screams and cries while tied to a chair. That doesn't help. In his powerlessness, he's raped on a dining room table and then runs for his life, his pursuers close on his heels. Once lost in the wilderness and facing a dying captor, Mark's pushed past the point of fuck it and answers the dying man as Gloria. Bartel, while less sympathetic, is an obviously broken man that is trying to fix the fracture of his life by substituting another in place of his lost love, a woman that has left a gaping hole in the entire village as well. Mark represented what they were missing, so he became it in order for them to continue to function. Everyone adapted to the best of their ability, making their responses to the surroundings and circumstances more of a Stockholm issue than anything else. Yeah. It's one reading, but I kind of see it. But then, of course, when you're going into the subject of time, it's 2 days. But I'm also wondering, because if you want to pinpoint a moment, it's when he stumbles upon the titular Calvaire, the Calvary, that maybe he kind of like gives up.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not disagreeing with you, except to the extent with which Mark himself actually believes it.
Yeah.
I think we're in agreement that he resists it up to a certain point, and then he does give into it. You
think it's an act?
Yeah. I think he finally realizes that he has to perform this in order to get out the other side.
What if the movie's really about a bad performer finally like honing his craft? I'm making light of this movie, which has very, very serious, like dark, depressing things in it. But, you know, he fooled me.
To become the pig, you must be the pig.
I mean, and it's, yeah, I mean, the whole sequence, I realize we've kind of just jumped to the end of this movie, but there really isn't a lot before the climax that I don't feel merits a lot of discussion, minus the pig fucking, because as we mentioned at the beginning of this episode, people fuck pigs in this movie.
Okay, there's plenty more to talk about. We definitely need to talk about the shootout that happens at Bartel's. We need to talk way more about the dance sequence that happens in that canteen, because that is the most bizarre fucking thing.
You're right. So, what do you want to start with? Pig fucking.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, I guess part of this, like the big thing that people will notice on a first watch is how, you've already alluded to it, Mark is constantly recontextualized as a woman by both Bartel as well as the men, but that's only because there are no other female characters, like not even animals from what we know of.
In the pig fucking scene though, is there not a woman standing there? Like, I feel like there's one woman, but I could be wrong.
No, it's a man with long hair.
Well, there you go. Okay.
It's a very deliberate idea, and I know if people aren't prepared to go on a journey with this film, you'll look at it and say, well, what the fuck kind of town doesn't have any women in it? Or if these men are looking to fuck so badly and they want this Gloria chick, like, why wouldn't they leave town and go find women? That's not the point.
This community is like a surreal, psychotic, fake world. This isn't a real place.
You said the word microcosm earlier, and that's what this is. This is a folklore stand-in for a number of different things. One of them being this town that has had the lifeblood sucked out of it, and it has left only madness and misery behind. Hence, pig fucking. How shocked were you? I mean, I told you that there was pig fucking.
I was prepared for the pig. I wasn't prepared for it that early.
We're talking, what, maybe 30 minutes in?
Yeah, I would say max 30 minutes into this movie. Okay, so that's a complaint that's lodged against these movies all the time, though, is that they're, and by these movies, I mean like the new French Extremity, it's excess for the sake of excess.
Oh, this isn't bad.
Well, that's what I'm saying, though. I mean, again, you tell some of this pig fucking in this movie, and again, I mean man on pig, not pig on pig. Just to clarify. But they're going to say, well, what possible purpose could that serve? So why include this scene in this movie?
It's giving you a lot of insight into the state of mind of what is happening. So I think early on in the film, too, you're maybe meant to believe that Bartel is different from these other men, because we don't see them interact until near the end. So we know that something's off with Bartel, but then when he warns Mark not to go into the village, it sort of fixes a us versus them idea, right? So then when Mark goes and, you know, like, what could be the craziest thing that you see? Holy shit, I stumble upon this group of guys fucking a pig. Well, now clearly I am not with them, and am therefore with the person who told me, don't go around these folks.
Well, and again, so the director also apparently thinks that we should sympathize with Bartel and not with Mark.
Mark is a vacant slot. You know what Mark is? Mark is a hole. He's something that people can just pour whatever they want into, be it a dick or a Gloria persona.
Yeah, they put a lot of things in Mark in this movie.
They do. And we should clarify that if you have not seen this film and you're holding off and our discussion is frightening you, there is assumed rape in this, but it's not graphic in the way that you would like. Yeah, I've seen way more graphic rape scenes, all of them involving women.
Well, that's the thing, though. I mean, I think it's important to note that like this is one of cinema's very rare instances of man-on-man rape. And I do also want to clarify, though, that even though we are discussing this on a, queer podcast through a queer lens, just because it is a man-on-man rape, it actually doesn't make it queer. That's not really what we're trying to say, because actually it's very much a quote-unquote hetero rape scene, because they view him as a woman. They actually think he's Gloria.
And we should also clarify, it ain't hot. It's not
No.
like we're, salivating over the idea like, oh, Mark's going to get it. It's horrifying. It is rape. It is assault.
The way it's shot is really cool too, because it's an overhead view of the camera and it like spins around but it's also very brief. I want to say it's like maybe 10 seconds tops of like them showing this one guy rape him.
Mm-hmm. The pig fucking lasts longer.
Yes, it does. We jumped ahead,
which is also, I would argue, very upsetting.
No, it is. I mean, those are the two moments where it's like, if you're describing this movie to someone, oh, it's that one with the pig fucking and the man rape.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's how I would describe this movie to someone. Which does it a disservice, of course, but...
That was actually my short synopsis. That one, with all that.
Yes, exactly. But yeah, I mean, so, okay, jumping back to your pig fucking. So...
My pig fucking.
Yes, your pig fucking. You picked this movie.
Take ownership of the pig fuck.
Yes. But yeah, so, I mean, I guess, yeah, on that level, I didn't even think about that as being a way to, like, yeah, put you further on the side of Bartel to be like, yeah, look at these fucking, like, hick villagers. They're fucking pigs. Makes total sense. So on a narrative level, that does work, too.
Yeah. And then, of course, he comes back. What's interesting to me, too, is that Mark doesn't tell Bartel what he saw. So there's still the dissociation between him as an outsider, and he's saying, even though this guy has offered to fix my van, he's put me up for the night, he's still not willing to confide in him, which is then when we get that really uncomfortable dinner scene, and you can tell that Mark does not want to sing for Bartel.
Right.
Which also tracks, because he's a performer, right? This is his craft, it's his profession. So to have someone just say, hey, can you get up at dinner a foot away from me and sing me a love song? Mark is clearly not down with that.
Well, I mean, again, there's also your standard, which this is a Western thing, I guess, even too, but it's like, he's like, oh, I'll fix the car. I'll call the mechanic. The mechanic's going to come. Oh, he can't come till tomorrow. I'll fix the car. I'll get the battery's out. Sorry. Mm-hmm. It's just one thing after another to keep Mark there. Until it all boils over, and yeah, Mark witnesses him. Well, he finds the phone unplugged, and then he witnesses Bartel trying to blow up his car, which he succeeds.
He does, indeed. It's just kind of crazy. Like, I think that's, if you hadn't already guessed it, that's your cue that Bartel is incredibly unhinged, because at that point, he's not even trying to hide it.
It's like when he blows up the car, yeah, I kind of figured.
Well, because... Mark comes out and he's looking around, and then all of a sudden, bam, he's on the ground, and that sucker is on fire. Like, it goes from 0 to 60 in the space of no time at all. Because
he knocks him out with the car battery, and I remember thinking that was edited very weird, because you don't actually see the impact. It's like he throws it, it cuts, but it cuts to him just immediately on the ground.
Mm-hmm. I would actually argue that the film's limited budget holds it back at a couple of different points, because I don't think they had either the ability to take multiple takes or to show, like, to do the stunt work properly.
Probably. I mean, that wouldn't surprise me. It probably all went to that fucking overhead shot during the rape scene.
Yeah. Okay, so what we're talking about there, we'll skip ahead again.
Okay.
So... at the Christmas dinner, Bartel and Boris and Mark are sitting around. They're, it's the picture of a lovely Christmas dinner with family, because Boris is kind of the slow son. We have no idea.
Okay, as I say, and also, this whole movie, Boris is looking for his dog, Bella. Mm-hmm. And we, to be honest, don't ever know if Bella exists.
No, he does come in carrying a sheep. Is it a sheep or calf?
It's a calf. It's definitely a calf.
I thought I saw horns.
Well, cows have horns.
Do they?
Well, not cows, I guess, but like a longhorn. Well, those are whatever. Anyway, he
comes in carrying a barnyard animal.
He comes in carrying a not dog.
Yeah, very clearly not a dog.
So we don't know if either A, this animal has always been Bella, and like he has had this animal, or if Bella never existed and he just picked it up to and just. Again, it assumes his identity, because earlier in the film, when Mark escapes and he gets trapped in a rabbit snare, Boris finds him and thinks he's Bella. So all the villains in this movie, like we're going backwards, they are all looking for something, and literally the first breathing, living thing they find, they automatically make that thing assume its identity.
And it's not madness. Like, they're not insane. It's that...
Are they?
See, I read it as Mark is the thing that they don't understand or that they haven't encountered, and therefore he can become what they need him to be.
Gotcha.
I mean, yes, you could argue, hey, there's a person. Why am I calling it a dog? That means I'm crazy. But I think in the world of the film, I mean, that's why Mark is a performer, because he's meant to take on these different roles.
Oh, I guess that makes sense. Well, I mean, yeah. And also, do we ever learn why Bartel had an issue with the villagers or the townsfolk?
Yes, it's understated. It's easy to miss. I'm not sure if it has something to do with the subtitles as well, but the impression you're meant to have is that Gloria was stepping out on Bartel with perhaps many of the villagers.
Well, I think if you're going by the end of the film, you could definitely think that, because if she fucked all of these men, that's why they're all, again, wanting to get Mark as Gloria. Like, he's filling this void in their lives that she clearly filled for all the men, because apparently she was the only woman in this town.
Yeah. I mean, the film is fascinating in the way that it just refuses you easy answers as well. Because if you go into this thinking, oh, at some point we're going to find Gloria's body, or we're going to get a suggestion of what happened to her. Nope.
No.
Literally all you know is that Gloria is no longer there, and now Mark is fucking Gloria.
Yeah.
Not literally. Mark is, fucking, Gloria. No.
I don't think that's the right sentence structure.
That's not right. I'm going to edit that bitch out.
I think I'm editing this one, actually, so no. So, before we get to your happy Christmas dinner, though, we have to go to the scene, though, when he goes to the bar and brags about Gloria's return.
Which is, to me, very uncomfortable.
It is.
I mean, so much of this film is very uncomfortable, but you can, I love the body language that these actors give these performances, because you really don't know what's going on with the villagers up until this point.
No.
So they're sitting around, they're having drinks, and then Bartel walks in, and it's like a guy, again, like a Western. It's the guy walking into the saloon, and the hush just falls over the entire crowd.
You know what it reminds? Because what I expected to happen was them to laugh him off, and this is so funny. The scene that it reminded me of was the scene in the Disney's animated Beauty and the Beast when when Papa comes in and he's like telling Gaston and everyone like, "Oh, there's a beast," and they're all laughing at him. That's exactly what it reminded me of. And then he leaves, and they start playing piano.
And they're both set in quaint provincial towns in France.
Yeah. Oh, maybe that's what he was going for.
Okay, so if you had to cast this by Disney characters,
oh my God,
who is Gaston? No.
I guess Robert in this case.
Probably. Yeah. Ew.
Yeah. I mean, he does his hunt for Belle or Gloria does lead to his own demise.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Let that be a lesson. Don't go chasing women into the woods. It can only lead to quicksand.
In France.
Yeah.
But okay, okay. Yes, that's all going on. He's bragging about Gloria's return, and they're all like, oh, like, haha, old man, nuh-uh.
Which is like, read the room, buddy. Like,
yeah.
People are not having it. He keeps insisting that the bartender get him a beer, and this guy looks like he either wants to run away or poison him.
Yeah. So then he leaves. What is this sequence? What is it?
Is this sequence? Okay, so I have a quote from the director.
Okay.
So he says that this scene was not originally in the script.
Okay.
Which I thought was kind of fascinating, because to me, if you're watching this film, as we said, obviously the pig fucking, the man raping, those are kind of standouts. But in terms of the highest level what the fuckery in this movie,
yeah,
it is this sequence where these men start to dance to this polka, and they are mimicking each other's movements.
It felt very like demonic cult like they're doing some kind of ritual dance.
So he says that he got inspiration from it from a 1968 movie called Un soir, un train, which translates into One Night, One Train. It's another Belgian film, but it involves a beautiful woman who probably represents death inviting the lead actor, Yves Montand, to dance in a very Flemish pub. He resists, but finally he dances with the beautiful lady and everyone else starts to dance too. So the director, he saw this and he thought, oh, that's the way that I have to shoot this scene. If you accept the dance scene, then everything is complete, and it's the key to opening the film and accepting the rest of the madness.
Huh.
Does that solve anything for you?
I mean, kinda, I guess. I mean, I like the scene because, again, as I said earlier, I think it's genuinely the most disturbing scene of the movie, which is saying something about a movie with pig fucking and man-on-man rape. Because, I mean, there's nothing violent or grotesque. Well, actually, no, I would say it is kind of grotesque, just because, like, the looks on all their faces, it's just, like, one of pure batshit insanity.
They look like zombies.
Yeah.
The fact that there isn't even hesitation to the way that they react. You know, it starts with one pair and then it just naturally kind of seeps out to the others where they'll get up and they'll start mimicking, and they're all doing the same motions, which does make sense because if you think of it as a dance and also as something that's a little bit mad,
right?
They get up and they just start all moving in the same rhythm. Because if you think of it as a polka, you would dance to a polka in a certain way.
Yeah.
But in this case, they are batshit crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, yeah, that makes total sense. Well, and yeah, so then that, again, listeners, if you haven't seen this, I think you can actually YouTube that scene specifically.
Oh, yeah. But it's interesting because, again, I imagine, I was about to say regular people, and then I'm like, no, we're all regular. I imagine people could look at that scene and say, oh, wow, that's like some weird gay shit, hey? Because it's a bunch of men just
dancing with each
other. But again, it is and it isn't, right?
Yeah, well, that's the thing, though. I mean, like, there's nothing sexual about it.
No.
And honestly, there's really nothing sexual about any of them until they see Mark.
Yeah. And then that's when they go homicidal.
The whole, again, from the point where they start busting into the house, it's like a fever dream. Like, yeah. I think even the lighting, I want to say, during that scene it's like red.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. The scene where they're all dancing together is kind of a blue-green.
Blue-green, yeah.
And then when they go into the house, it seems like it's lit by the colors of the Christmas tree. Because don't forget, this is a Christmas movie.
That makes sense.
Hey, Donato, you could watch this for your podcast.
Oh my god. Matt Donato, haha. Happy Christmas. I actually do, I keep going back to that overhead shot during the rape scene, which again is like a 10-second shot maybe. But I think it's all in red, which would make sense. But yeah, the whole ending is like just like this kind of blur of things. Oh, you know what it kind of reminds me of, and granted this movie came later, is the batshit climax of Mother.
Okay, interesting.
And I guess that's what I'm trying to say is, you know, like how that movie is very much like an allegory or like a microcosm of just like, I mean, if you want to read it this way, of like, you know, the Bible.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
I think that's the only way you can read it. If you're reading it in any other way, you're probably missing the most obvious way to do it.
Yeah. And so that's also, yeah, like how I felt about this movie. Like it was such pandemonium. I love that word. I so rarely get to use it in a sentence. And you can't take this literally, you know, it's all very much like a representative of something else. And what that is kind of up to you as, like, you know, you the viewer.
Well, this is full-blown insanity. So the minute that these men burst into this house, all of a sudden they're shooting people. Because of the way that it's shot, it's so frenetic and fractured. It really is pandemonium. You don't have a good sense of what's happening. You know for sure that Bartel gets shot.
Well, so Boris actually, I think, gets shot first. Boris dies immediately.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, he gets shot through the window.
Yeah.
That's what anticipates the rest of the attack.
Yes.
Whether or not he dies is unclear. It's far more suggestive that Bartel does bite it. Because they shoot him in the face. I think so. Yeah.
No, they do, because they point the gun down on him as he's on the ground, like after the rape and after Mark's already escaped.
Okay,
but
and then from then on, it's like
And do you think there's a significance to, because okay, there's so much squealing in this movie from the animals. So you have that calf of Boris's that, oh god, I felt so bad for that calf. And then other than the pigs and the pig fucking scene, you've also
they've got the pig tracker.
Yes, it's like a hunting dog, but it's a hunting pig, and it is squealing for the entire like end of this movie,
which is hysterical because I remember not. Yeah, okay. So this last time that I saw it, I definitely had a moment where I wondered whether or not that was Bella, because they're using a pig as a hunting. Like you'd normally see a hunting dog, right?
Yeah, like a hound.
It's like, oh, I wonder if that's actually Bella.
I mean, the movie doesn't really care to answer that question for you, but
the movie doesn't care to answer any questions.
I mean, but you see, though, like it's the lack of questions answered doesn't really like. I don't mind.
Not bother you?
I know. I was gonna say it doesn't bother me. I was trying to find another phrase to say, but then it would in something else. I'm trying to think of another movie where it is intentionally vague and it's more frustrating. Like I didn't find that narrative. Like that lack of narrative closure frustrating in this movie.
But it's because the movie's not interested in posing them as actual questions either. It's merely meant to string you along so that you're just like, well, who is Bella? What is happening with this Gloria character?
It's window dressing on whatever the bigger picture of the movie is trying to tell.
Yeah. In a way, the film is a mystery because you're constantly left to wonder what the fuck is going on. But that's it.
Yeah.
Like, that's why it's a journey.
I was honestly surprised by Bartel's death because the movie sets him up to be the big bad, and then that is not the case. And it just turns out to be all these villagers because they kill Bartel immediately. I guess the uprising against, well, he's not really their leader, but I don't know if maybe
adversary.
Yeah, I don't really know if there was like I mean, you kind of went into it, but like the political climate, like in France at the time, if maybe that's kind of like, oh, like that's the citizens overthrowing their political leader or something. Like you think the head politician's the bad guy, but it's actually the citizens themselves.
Quite possibly. I know that the director did intend for us to feel sympathy. Like, the sympathetic figure is definitely meant to be Bartel.
And that's, okay, I don't really get why.
I'm not sure that there's a need for a why. Part of it is that this film presents Mark as a protagonist, but there's also nothing to Mark. Like, if you think back on our experiences of watching the film, what do we know about Mark apart from the fact that he's a singer in between gigs?
I mean, nothing. Well, yeah, he's a blank slate, which again is why these people can put their desires on him because there's nothing there. He's just, like as we said, he's a hole.
Okay, and now what do we know about Bartel?
Yeah, he gets the tragic backstory that his wife was cheating on him with the whole village and then left.
Mm-hmm. And then he gets this opportunity to be reunited with her. And I don't like to speculate about what films would be had they taken a different turn of narrative events. But there's an interesting suggestion that if we think of Mark as moving towards acceptance and playing the part, how different would that Christmas dinner have turned out had the villagers not stormed the castle?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's that. Then you're just talking about what is Bartel's endgame.
He had his wife back, man. They would have lived happily ever after.
Yeah.
That's why it's sad that he dies.
Well, but then at any point, though, like, well, then again, we're going back to what would Mark do? Has he acquiesced and accepted his position as Gloria? Or is he putting on an act this whole time?
Yeah. And I love the fact that we don't know, because you could say, you could be me and say, no, I think he's just playing the part to do what he needs to do to survive. Or you could say, no, he's accepted it and he is now Gloria.
Okay. Well, we've dealt with that. We've dealt with your little Christmas dinner. We've dealt with your rape scene.
Why are these all my...
They're all your things because you picked this movie.
I picked this movie.
Yeah. But again, like I think I walked out of this movie giving it a 3, and I think I've kind of maybe bumped it up to 3.5 the more like I read about it, the more we've talked about it.
Yes, success.
I know. I mean, it's not a movie I'm ever really going to watch again anytime soon anyway. But, so, okay. Mark escapes. The villagers, they kill Boris, they kill Bartel, they've got their hunting pig, and they're out on the town, or on the forest, trying to find Mark.
Yeah, it's a night out with the girls.
Yeah, yes. Mark comes across a cavalry. Oh, I guess we also forgot to mention, though, that Mark, I mean, we mentioned it, but we didn't really touch on it. Mark gets crucified.
Yeah, I had completely forgotten about that.
It is very strange. And again, I struggled to find the significance of it outside of the fact that that is one of the Calvaires in the movie. A Calvary is a type of monumental public crucifix, sometimes encased in an open shrine, most commonly found across northern France from Brittany, east, through Belgium and Portugal and Galicia. So, some Calvaire are distinguished from a simple crucifix cross by the inclusion of three-dimensional figures surrounding the crucifixion itself, typically representing Mary and the apostles of Jesus, though later saints and symbolic figures may also be depicted. But a lot of times also in northern France and Belgium, they're erected at the junction of routes and tracks, functioning both as navigation devices and objects of veneration. I don't know what that means.
It's like worship.
Oh, okay.
Which is also why we see one when he crosses from the woods into, I think we're meant to assume it's a cemetery.
Yes. Well, and so here's another interesting fact, though. So since medieval times, they have fixed the landscape, symbolically acquiring it for the Christian faith, in the same way that previously megalithic monuments marked prehistoric landscapes according to presumed religious and ideological imperatives. So then what? So this town's just like super religious?
Quite possibly. I mean, there's virtually no explicit references to religion in here.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to read between the lines. So obviously the crucifixion is the most explicit version of that. But I think there's something interesting to be said that if you look at the end of the film, when he does end up leading Robert into this cemetery or graveyard, he crosses that liminal boundary between the woods and the graveyard. And there is another example of a Calvaire there. And it's at that point that he accepts his role. And you could also argue that Robert falls into a grave, which goes back to that whole thing about like France being a war zone that has open wounds that it has not healed yet.
Well, so then, okay, let's go back to this first crucifixion, though. So why do you think Bartel crucifies Mark? Is he doing it as a form of worship because he worshipped Gloria? Or is it a way of like, I don't know, he's purging Mark of his sins by crucifying him? Which, I mean, I know that really wasn't the point of the crucifixion, like it was Christ, absolving the world of their sins, taking on their sins. But like, what is, like, why do this? Again, if he truly loves Gloria,
why would he do this?
Yes.
Yeah. You could definitely look at it as the first. That's the obvious literal interpretation. It's he's punishing Mark and he's trying to keep him in place while he goes down to the bar. I think it's probably more the latter. So it's a little bit more absolving Mark of his sins and trying to bring him more in line, like more Gloria.
What? Yeah, I say, what if it's absolving Mark of his identity?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's preparing him to more fully embrace his Gloria-ness.
Yes, that
his glory.
Well, Britney Spears. Glory.
No, like there's a reason that the wife's name is Gloria.
Oh, that makes sense. Sorry, I thought you were referencing one of Britney Spears' better albums.
We could go with that too.
No, so but then that kind of like supports my point about when he comes across the Calvaire at the end of the film. It's bringing back the memory of the beginning of his transformation in the crucifixion, and that cements his transformation into Gloria.
Yeah. It is interesting that he lets Robert die after committing to this performance or identity, whichever way you choose to interpret it. And then that's actually the end, that we don't see Mark again. We just see this panning shot of presumably him making his way through the woods. But like that's the end of Mark. Again, there's no closure, so we really don't know, like, has he stripped off the dress and become Mark, or is he still wearing it and he's like Gloria embodied? It's so open.
I forget, is he wearing the dress like this whole time during this climax?
He is, yeah.
Okay, cool.
The minute that he puts on that dress, he never takes it off.
See, though, why doesn't he take it off?
Because it's winter. It's cold.
I don't know. But I think the dress is on over his... I don't know. I don't really remember.
No, he's definitely, I think, just wearing underwear.
But yeah, you pose a good question, though. Yeah, why does he just let Robert sink into the bog?
I think it's because at that point he knows he's no longer in danger. If we look at it as a bit of a religious experience or a religious moment, he's giving this person what they need before they go to their death.
Instead of just helping him.
I mean, to me, this is also a huge difference between what you would see in a North American film and a film like a foreign film. Because in a North American film, he would like kick Robert's face in and then he would run off and flag down a truck, and that would be the final image.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is definitely a more interpretative ending. And I mean, again, would you even call it a happy ending?
No. No.
Like, no matter which way you look at it, he's gotten away, but
Yeah.
for now, I mean, again, there's still the other villagers out there.
Mm-hmm.
But either A, they're going to find him,
Yep.
or he has completely broken mentally and he has become Gloria.
Or he's just fucking destroyed and he does manage to get out of there. But, I mean, you can't be the same after an ordeal such as this.
Yeah, no, exactly. And it sounds so terrible. I was thinking to myself earlier, I was like, the worst thing he went through, it was something, I guess it was that crucifixion. Like, the rape wasn't that bad. And then I caught myself thinking, the rape wasn't that bad? Like, again, no matter how you look at it, rape is always bad. And I was like, why the fuck did I just think that to myself?
Because this is such an ordeal.
Yeah.
I mean, if you compare it to the pantheon of other films in the new French Extremity, what he goes through, there is worse. There's so much worse.
Yeah, I know.
But as far as this film goes, like, this film is a legitimate ordeal.
Yeah. I mean, again, both for the characters and for the viewers watching it. And I don't mean that in a bad way, although I'm sure many people would watch it and say it is.
My bigger concern is that people would watch this and say, nothing really happens and it's kind of boring, and then it gets really violent at the end.
But I think that's the thing that people say about a lot of these French Extremity films.
Oh, for sure.
But again, yeah, if you're looking at all of them literally, which, I mean, again, that's how I look at Inside, that's kind of how I look at High Tension, that kind of is the case. But, clearly I need to go watch them again to see if there's something more to it.
Yeah, agree to disagree. Maybe we will get there one day.
I mean, we can't really cover Inside for this podcast, I don't think, but maybe I'll just watch it one day when it finally comes to Blu-ray in the States, because it's only available on DVD.
I would argue that we could cover. It's a love affair between two women over a child.
Well, listeners, you heard it here first. Stay tuned for that.
There we go.
Okay, well, any other talking points you want to touch on with this one?
No, I feel like we've gone through the ordeal and come out the other side. I'm feeling a little bit Gloria-esque myself.
Do you have a game for this movie?
It was tempting to say, what would this look like if we tried to turn it into a North American film? But I just don't think it's possible.
No, I don't think you could ever. I mean, well, we were just talking about, last week about how, the magic of cinema, you can take a video game like Fatal Frame and do anything with it.
Mm-hmm.
So you could do it, but actually, no, that's actually a really good point, though, because look at the two French Extremity films that have been remade for America.
Oh, gosh. The Inside remake is so watered down, it's pathetic.
It is, and Martyrs is too, but I actually think that Martyrs is a better film, because you haven't seen the Martyrs remake, have you?
I haven't, no.
Okay. It's not great. I cut it a lot of slack in my review because even though it is watered down, it does something, it takes the premise of Martyrs and does something new with it that I appreciated, even if it isn't wholly successful.
Interesting. I feel like that's a topic for a future minisode that we might be covering on the Patreon feed next month.
Yeah, and I actually own the Blu-ray of that remake of Martyrs because I got it as a review copy. So I can watch that whenever. Inside, though, it's just the same story, watered down, and it doesn't fix any of the problems that I had with the original, namely those stupid cops.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the cops are dumb.
And it sucks because I like both those actresses. Like Rachel Nichols, I fucking love. P2, hello. And then what's her face from Mulholland Drive?
Laura Herring.
There you go. Oh, and that ending. They fucking botch that ending. It's so
the
bad.
ending is the worst. That, to me, is the thing that fucks it up the most.
Yeah. Which, again, but that's the thing. When you're making any of these films, you're taking films that are known for their extremeness, and I guess extremity. Mm-hmm. And you don't make them extreme.
Well, no. Because the belief is that Americans can't handle it.
Again, like, us, like, and me specifically, I'm never much like, why would you remake that? That doesn't need to be remade. But it's like, it doesn't need to be remade if you're not going to at least try to, like, do the same spirit. You don't have to do the same thing, but, like, keep that spirit of extremity into it, which is, like, the whole backbone of those movies.
Well, keep the spirit, but have something to say.
Well, and that's the thing, these movies, most of them have something to say, and these remakes, well, again, I think the Martyrs one kind of does, but that's also because a statement is built into that premise. Mm-hmm. Whereas inside, you might have to look harder for it, clearly, because I didn't see it in the first one.
Yeah, it's tricky. I mean, all of these films are very interesting, and if you find yourself being one of those people who says, oh, there's nothing but gore, it's just, like, I would urge people not to look at these films in the same vein as the torture porn films that we had here in North America, which, again, also have things to say. They're just often of a less philosophical nature.
And I would argue less artistically filmed or created or made.
Yeah, there's something to be said for directors really having their finger on the content and the craft for these films.
Well, yeah, because as gross and shocking and disturbing as these French films are, there's at least a beauty to them. Whereas for a lot of the torture porn films that came out in America, you can't really say that about them. I wouldn't say, oh, Hostel's really beautiful. But like something like Martyrs, or again, even Inside, like it's a pretty film.
Oh my gosh, there's gorgeous shots in those movies.
Mm-hmm.
Hostel, there's some good framing. I'll give Eli Roth that.
Or you don't have that rapid shock editing that the Saw franchise has.
Oh yeah, that's true.
There isn't xenophobia in these French Extremity movies like there is. Well, because this one kind of has.
There is, but that's often what they're addressing.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas in something like a Turistas, they're not addressing xenophobia. Xenophobia just is they're the bad guys. The islanders are the bad guys.
Which is interesting, coming back to Calvaire, just to wrap things up.
Yeah.
I have seen people misinterpret this film in their comparisons to Texas Chainsaw Massacre and say, oh, this film is really just about country folk being, backwater, mentally handicapped, mentally unstable, don't go into the woods kind of deal. Like, people have said, oh, this is the French Deliverance. It's like, no, it isn't.
It's just because of the pigs. It's just because of the pig fucking.
All right. Walk me through the social media sign-off.
So that is Calvaire. If you haven't seen it, maybe we've made you want to see it. Seek it out and see it.
Gosh, I hope so.
Maybe not.
It's a hard to find film, but it's worth seeking it.
Yeah, for sure. But before we announce what we are covering next week, let's do some housekeeping first. So if you want to reach us on Twitter, you can reach me at Traced Thurman.
And I am at B Stole My Remote. That's the letter B.
And if you're tweeting about the podcast, be sure to use the hashtag HorrorQueers in your tweets. You can also email us at horrorqueers@gmail.com. We would also love it if you go to iTunes and take 2 seconds to leave us a star rating. Or if you have a little bit more time, please leave us a review. If you've liked what you've listened to and you want even more content, please visit our Patreon page at patreon.com/horrorqueers, where you can get tons of bonus content, 2 full-length bonus episodes and 2 minisodes each month. This episode is dropping in the middle of May, so we'll have an episode on Extremely Wicked, Shockingly Evil, and Vile. And coming up, I believe next week, is an episode on The Perfection. It might be 2 weeks. I'm not really sure of the time.
All right.
But Joe, what are we covering next week?
Well, Trace, I'm dragging you back north. I am forcing you to revisit. Actually, is this our first director revisit?
Yeah, I was going to mention it when you said it.
Sweet. Okay, so this is the first time on the podcast that we're going to be revisiting the work of a director, and I am going to make us watch David Cronenberg's The Brood for its 40th anniversary.
Now, I have seen this one, and I really like The Brood. And listeners, I'm sure it's available to stream, but it's also a Criterion Blu-ray, so it is very easy to find.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Well, I'm very excited about that and to revisit Cronenberg and to let you take the reins because you are the master of Cronenberg.
Oh, I love that title.
And on that note, I think we can cross out Calvaire.
And cross out horror queers.
This episode was brought to you by the Bloody Disgusting Podcast Network, delivering your weekly horror podcast fix. To find more episodes of this show and others, please visit bloodydisgusting.com/podcast network.
Get in, losers. This is the Lady Killers, a Feminine Rage podcast. I'm Jen.
I'm Sammy.
I'm Rocco.
And I'm May. Our podcast is a tribute to the female-identifying killers in horror and more.
Each episode will feature us, your Supreme Court of female murderers, discussing our favorite lady killers, from your Julias and Jennifers to your Carries and Christines.
We'll tell her story, decide if it's good for her horror, and answer the most important question of all: would we die for her?
Join us on Thursdays as we pull on our sweaters, snatch our ice picks, sharpen our scissors, and honor the lady killers who live on the silver screen.
No boys were harmed in the making of this podcast.
Yet.
It was late in the afternoon when the professor and I took our way towards the east, whence I knew Jonathan was coming.
Jonathan Harker has asked me to note this, as he says he is hardly equal to the task, and he wants an exact record kept.
Dear Madam Mina, I have read your husband's so wonderful diary. Strange and terrible as it is true. I will pledge my life on it.
God preserve my sanity, for to this I am reduced. Safety and the assurance of safety are things of the past.
I am in hopes that I shall see more of you at Castle Dracula.
Listen to Regarding Dracula wherever you listen to podcasts, or find us online at bloody.fm.